My name is Arya. I'm 35 years old and I live and work in Boston as a financial analyst for an investment firm. I never imagined that a single dinner could completely shatter the fragile trust I still held in the word family. That evening, I returned to the house where I grew up, thinking it would be a warm gathering after months of busy work. My mother wore her old floral apron. My father poured wine as if celebrating something grand. Relatives drifted in, and my younger brother Ethan smiled like he already knew the script. Before I even had time to take off my coat, my father pushed a thick stack of papers toward me, my name printed boldly on the very first page. Documents transferring $85,000 of Ethan's company debt requiring my signature to save the family's future. I looked around the table at the familiar faces and realized I wasn't a guest at a family meal. I was the target of a plan that had been staged long before I arrived. Have you ever been in a situation where your entire family joined forces to pressure you into taking on a debt that wasn't yours? Have you ever felt like the backup plan in your own home? Share your story below. Hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment so I know you're following along because what I'm about to tell you next, you won't be able to look away from. I stood frozen, staring at my name printed neatly on the thick file in front of me, as if it were bait, waiting for me to bite. No one spoke. The room grew saucilent. I could hear the clink of a glass trembling as my mother set down the soup ladle. The smell of roast meat, garlic bread, and the special wine my father only opened on momentous occasions suddenly felt suffocating. I lifted my eyes, scanning each face. My father sat with arms crossed, lips pressed tight, waiting for a specific reaction. My mother tilted her head, her eyes shimmering under layers of mascara. Ethan leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers in rhythm with the soft music playing from the kitchen speaker as if nothing important was happening. I set the file down gently but firmly. What is this supposed to mean? My voice wasn't loud, but sharp enough to cut through the quiet. Ethan smirked and shrugged like it was no big deal. Don't be so tense, Arya. It's just paperwork. If you sign, I can restructure the loan with the bank and keep the company from collapsing. My mother jumped in, placing her hand softly over mine. Family helps family, sweetheart. Ethan is fighting to build the business. It's about all of our reputations. I glanced at the table. The fine white china with gold trim reserved for holidays was carefully laid out. The creamy roast chicken I used to love as a child. Even an apple pie was ready in the kitchen, filling the air with sweetness. But I didn't see care in these details. I saw props arranged to push me into the role they had already assigned. Why did Ethan take out this debt? I asked, eyes fixed on my mother. My father answered slowly, like delivering a moral lesson. Business always comes with risk. No one could predict construction costs rising. And when partners fail to keep their word, who bears the weight? I nodded slightly, but turned my gaze to Ethan. So this $85,000, was it really for materials? Or to pay off a personal loan you hid behind the company name? His lips tightened. Do you have to ask in such an unpleasant way? It's a simple question. If this is as serious as everyone says, I have a right to know the truth. My mother fumbled for a tissue, dabbing her eyes as if my words were a knife. Sweetheart, it's not that Ethan did anything wrong. He was just too confident, and now he needs support. You're successful. You can help without it really hurting you. My hands clenched under the table. They only ever used the word successful when they wanted something. When I stayed up all night writing my thesis, no one asked if I was exhausted. When I landed my first job, my mother only said, "Remember to send money home so your father can fix the roof." I rose slowly. I need a moment outside. No one stopped me. They just exchanged glances, exhaling as though I was overreacting. In the hallway, I paused before a family photo taken 8 Christmases ago. Ethan stood in the center, grinning with a giant gift box. I sat on the edge, an a-discounted sweater my mother had bought at the supermarket, my smile tight and unconvincing. My mother's footsteps clicked behind me. Do you always have to make things so difficult, Arya? I turned to meet her gaze. Do you think I make things difficult, or are you just not used to me asking questions? She sighed, hear you softening but still heavy with expectation. We just want everything to be okay. Ethan is your brother. If you don't help, the company will fall. Our family's name will be ruined. Do you really want to see him fail? I didn't answer. That question was never meant for an answer. It was a weapon she'd used for years, and it always struck deep. Back at the table, I forced my voice steady. So, everything is already arranged, and all that's missing is my signature. My father nodded. Yes, the lawyer will be here Monday. If you sign tonight, we can send a scanned copy to the bank right away. I looked directly at Ethan. Tell me the truth. Why me? Why not Dad? Why not Mom? Why not anyone else?" He raised an eyebrow. "Because I know you don't want to watch everything fall apart." I let out a short laugh. "Not because your credit scores and theirs are too low." Silence. My mother's eyes flickered toward my father, then back to her plate. I leaned back, drumming my fingers against the table. "Thank you for dinner, for the apple pie, for the nice china. But it seems this meal wasn't prepared for eating. It was prepared for signing." My father's voice hardened. "You're going too far. Or am I just being honest?" I tilted my head, meeting his eyes. "Have either of you ever co-signed for Ethan before?" No answer, no denial. I rose again to leave the room. "I'll think about it, but I won't be forced. Especially not at a dinner disguised so neatly as a trap." Behind me, my mother's voice cracked. "Arya, we're family." I crossed the threshold without turning back. And because we're family, I expected not to be treated like a walking wallet. I left that house with a chill racing down my spine. Whether from the October night air or the way they'd united to press me down, I couldn't tell. My thin knit coat did nothing to keep out the cold that gripped my heart. In the car, my hands shook as I buckled the seatbelt. The image of that file haunting me, even though I'd closed it with every ounce of composure I had. My name printed in bold uppercase letters sat above the empty signature line like a verdict. The relatives in the dining room smiling, patting my back, murmuring that sacrificing a little for family is worth it, still lingered in my mind. Even Ruth, my mother's longtime friend, who hadn't shown up to a single milestone of mine in 20 years, was there. She sat directly across from me, hands around a glass of lemonade, Heary's brimming with faux sympathy, as though I was about to sign a sacred covenant to save the family's future. "You've always been the strong, responsible one, Arya," Ruth had said. "Ethan doesn't have that kind of grit. You're the anchor of this family, one signature, and everything will be fine." I only smiled faintly, nodding without reply, because I realized I was standing on a stage and every loved one had become an actor. None of them were themselves anymore. They were roles cast to corner me into a decision with no escape. Streetlights streaked across my windshield, illuminating memories like frames of an old film. When I was 15, Ethan smashed the new television screen. I was scolded for not watching him carefully. When I won a full scholarship to college, my mother's first question was, "So, what about rent money?" But when Ethan dropped out his senior year, the family pulled money to fund his startup. I had grown used to the passenger seat in every family decision. But tonight, I didn't want that seat anymore. My phone buzzed nonstop in my pocket. Texts from Mom, Ethan, Dad. I didn't open a single one. I just drove back to my small apartment in North Boston, the one no one else knew the door code to. The only place where no family dinner could be staged with paperwork waiting beside the apple pie. Inside, I tossed my bag onto a chair and poured myself a glass of cold water. It slid down my throat, but didn't wash away the sting of betrayal burning in my chest. I opened my laptop and logged into the company HR portal. My quarterly bonus had just posted that morning. The number glowed on the screen, $23,000. The exact figure my father had mentioned at dinner. "If you sign, the bank will approve immediately. They've already reviewed your credit." How did he know my credit report? I bit my lip and checked the login history. A strange IP address had accessed my file from a mobile device outside the company. I copied the address and called Lily, my closest friend since college, now an IT manager at another firm. Her voice came after 3 rings. "What's going on?" she asked, concerned. "Lily, if someone outside wanted internal company info like bonuses or transaction history, they'd need someone inside to give them access, right?" "Absolutely. You'd need an admin account or a tech with clearance. Nobody else could see that unless someone inside deliberately shared it." My hand tightened around the glass. "There's someone in it at my company. She's the daughter of my mom's best friend. They came over for dinner last month." "Want me to check it?" Lilia skid. "Send me that IP. I'll trace it for you." I typed the string of characters quickly and hit send. A few minutes later, Lily replied, "Confirmed. The device belongs to Lisa Henderson. She works part-time in the remote security division. She accessed the data portal using the company's VPN. Arya, you need to deal with this immediately. This is no longer just a family issue." I put the phone down, my heart racing in my chest. They knew exactly how much money, schedule, and the transfer dates. It was no coincidence that the dinner took place right after the bonus had been updated. It was no coincidence that Ethan had said, All you have to do is sign and the bank will approve right away. You just got your bonus, didn't you? Everything had been calculated down to the smallest detail, calculated so carefully that I wasn't left a single breath of space. The phone buzzed again. A message from Ethan. Have you ever thought that you're the only one in the family who doesn't have to carry any burden? Now it's your turn to do the right thing. I turned off the screen, inhaled deeply, then stood up. In my head, my grandmother's familiar words echoed. If you let them decide for you, when the time comes that you want to say no, you won't have a voice left to say it. I pulled an old notebook from the drawer. Inside were notes I had made while preparing my student loan paperwork back in college. Every signature, every statement, every phone call to negotiate interest rates. I had done them all on my own. No one stood behind me. No one co-signed. And now, just when I had finally managed to lift my head a little, they were dragging me back, demanding that I shoulder the debt for a company I had never even been asked if I wanted to invest in. I reopened to the file my mother had slipped into my bag. I didn't even know when she had put it there, flipping through the pages. I stopped at the section on legal responsibility if the primary borrower failed to pay. It all fell on the cosigner. If Ethan defaulted, I would be the one whose assets were seized first. Looking at his financial history, I had no illusions left. $85,000 wasn't just money. It was power obligation. A chain they wanted to lock around my neck in the name of family. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and placed a hand on my chest, trying to calm my heartbeat. Tomorrow, I would have to choose. Continue playing their responsible daughter, or break apart the family structure that had been built to keep me from ever daring to resist. I couldn't sleep that night. Streetlights spilled faint patterns across the ceiling, but my room felt darker than ever. Not because of the lack of light, but because old images filled my mind. Memories I thought had long been packed away in some dusty corner of my past. I got up, pulled on Ethan's robe, and quietly opened the wooden cabinet in the corner. Inside was the old box I had carried from my college dorm to my first apartment. And now here it still sat there among old papers and unused resumes. I knelt down, pulled it out, the yellowed tape peeling at the edges. Inside were small things no one else would care about. But to me they were inseparable pieces of my childhood. A few photos from a film camera, my old student ID, my college acceptance letter, and a dark blue diary with a tiny broken clasp. I opened it, the faint scent of old paper rising. Handwritten lines in purple ink appeared like scars that time could never erase. June, when I was 12. Today, Ethan got a new bike, red with white stripes. Mom said it was because he was good at math. I got a high score in literature too, but she just said, "That's fine. I'm not sad. I'm used to it." Another page. November, Ethan's birthday. Mom and Dad invited friends over. Balloons, cake, a clown. My birthdays are always just a meal, sometimes with a card. They say I'm too old now for parties. Another page. The day I received my full scholarship. Mom just said, "Good. That saves on tuition." Dad said, "Don't let it make you arrogant." I was happy though. But when I wanted to go out and celebrate with friends, Mom asked me to stay home because Ethan wanted to go see a movie. I wasn't sure what feeling swelled in my chest. Not quite anger, not exactly sadness. It was more like something quietly breaking a shell I had wrapped around myself to keep from getting hurt, now cracking apart. I closed the diary, holding it as if it were alive. Those words weren't written to complain. They were written to remind me that what I felt was real, that I hadn't imagined being pushed aside. My phone pinged softly. A new message from Ethan. "Mom can't sleep because of you. Dad says you should reconsider. Don't blow this out of proportion." I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, checked my balance, then pulled up a spreadsheet. I created 2 columns. On one side, every expense I had paid for myself since I was 18. On the other, every time I had provided financial support to my family, college tuition, me, deposit for my first apartment, me. Living expenses during the first 2 years when my salary wasn't enough, me. Time Mom needed urgent payment for an eye exam before insurance reimbursed, me. The time Dad needed car repairs and called me in tears, me. Ethan, borrowed temporarily to invest in an e-commerce venture, then lost everything, me. The family vacation I wasn't even invited to, but still sent money to cover costs, also me. I stared at the spreadsheet, then leaned back in my chair. Why was I always the one to patch the gaps? Why did my parents, though they loved me, still choose to overlook my quiet sacrifices simply because someone else cried louder? The next morning, as Thiessen filtered through the kitchen window, I brewed a cup of black tea and opened my email. A new message from my mother with the subject line, "Talk." Inside were just a few lines. "I know you were upset yesterday, but Ethan really needs help. If you don't, his company will be sued and our family will be disgraced. I don't want our relatives laughing at us. It breaks my heart that you don't understand this." Not a single word asking if I was okay. Not a single acknowledgement that the dinner had been staged. Only her pain at my refusal to act as the pillar holding up a house that had been tilting for years. I sat down my tea, pulled out the old diary, opening to the very last page where I had once started a poem. No one counts the nights I stayed awake, only asked why my eyes were ringed in dark. No one remembered I walked to school, only scolded why my shoes were torn. I had wanted to finish it back then, but I was too young to understand why I felt so lost in a house full of people. Now I didn't need to finish it. I understood. I understood why what my parents called family love always came with an invoice. I understood why I was never allowed to be weak. While Ethan stumbled over and over, always lifted back up by hands that weren't his own, I snapped photos of the diary pages on my phone. I wanted to keep them, but I also wanted to send them to myself in the future, as a reminder that my pain had been real. Then I composed a new email address to myself. Subject, don't forget, I attached the photos and typed one line. Whenever you feel guilty for saying no, read this again. It's not that you don't love your family, but you need to love yourself too. I hit send. That afternoon, I reopened the financial spreadsheet and added a new row at the bottom, proposed bank transfer under pressure, leaving the column blank. The question had no clear answer yet, but I needed it there, like ink on my palm, reminding me not to forget. As the evening sun painted the floor in gold, I sat in the armchair holding a cup of cold coffee. Nothing was settled, but I had a direction. I logged back into the system, opening the access logs again, more detailed. Not just the IP address, but the exact time, device, and account used. I sent all the data to Lily with a note. Check who has access and who used it. 10 minutes later, she replied with a quick voicemail. Arya, the person who logged in was Lisa Henderson, Marlene's daughter, your mom's close friend, right? The device was her personal phone using the company VPN. She accessed the system at 6:16 p.m. Tuesday, 2 hours before your family dinner. She had clearance because she's currently assigned to remote security support. I set the phone down, my chest heavy as stone. Lisa, the same woman who used to show up at family gatherings when I was little, who had helped my mother pick out a wedding dress for Ethan. The last time I saw her was at my parents' house 2 weeks ago. Just dropping by for fun, Mom had said. Turns out she had dropped by to dig into my private information. I leaned my head back against the chair, eyes closed. It felt like I was living in a play where someone else had already written every line. They didn't just want my signature. They needed it before I could realize the whole thing had been crafted as a calculated deception. Their plan had to be carried out quickly, neatly, leaving me no time to react. I opened my email and typed a short message to HR. Urgent. I want to report unauthorized access to internal financial records. I have reason to believe someone in IT has violated personal privacy. Attached are comparative data files. I hit send. It felt like pushing a button I couldn't unpress. Almost immediately, a call came through. Unknown number. I answered. Arya, this is Mike from Internal Security. I got your report and I'm reviewing it, but there's a bigger issue. This morning, someone claiming to be a relative of yours called HR requesting income verification, saying it was to confirm financial co-signing information. Did you authorize anyone to do that? I shot up from my chair, my throat dry. Absolutely not. Who called? No real name left, but the system recorded the call. We'll extract the audio and send it to you right away. I hung up, my palms ice cold. They hadn't just peeked at my accounts. They had called my company. They were trying to create proof that I had already agreed before I'd even said yes. A voicemail notification appeared on my screen. I pressed play. Hello, this is Catherine Donovan, Arya's mother. I'm assisting with her banking paperwork related to a family financial matter. Could you please confirm her most recent quarterly income and the timing of her transfers? Arya is very busy, so I'm reaching out on her behalf. I don't remember how hard I was gripping the phone, only that my hands were trembling violently. My mother, that very voice, the one who'd smiled at me all through dinner, offered me another slice of pie, asked if I was still working late nights. All the while, she was using my name like a card to swipe away my control. The phone rang again. It was Lily. I dug deeper. Arya. Ethan is being sued. His company doesn't just owe the bank $85,000. He also used your parents' house as collateral for a private loan from an out-of-state group. They sent a payment notice at the start of this month. The deadline is next Thursday. I froze. What did you just say? They're not suing Ethan yet because the deadline hasn't passed. But if it does and he doesn't pay, they have the right to seize the collateral under the private agreement. No court required. And since the house is under your parents' names, then I was the only one with a good enough credit score to rescue them exactly as planned. A perfect circle. A closed trap. A performance they wanted me to believe was family loyalty. I went straight to my bedroom, opened the safe where I kept my documents. I pulled out every old loan contract of mine, student loans, first-year utility bills, the tiny interest payments I used to scrape together in college. Silent witnesses of the years I survived without anyone's backing, without a single signature beside mine. I photographed each document, created a secure folder titled Proof of Independence, and backed it up 3 different ways: external hard drive, personal email, and private cloud. Then I opened a new bank account on the West Coast, moved part of my savings there, and updated my mailing address to a friend's place in Portland. Every step I took felt automatic, but inside me, waves of fury kept rising. My family hadn't called to ask my opinion. They just wanted my signature, whether I agreed or not. They needed me to appear as the solution, a walking wallet, the responsible one. I had stayed silent too long. So long, they mistook my silence for consent. But when someone treats silence as a default yes, a single no can topple the whole structure. And I was preparing to say it. Not through tears, not with rage, but with evidence, and with a resolve they never saw coming. Monday morning, I stepped out of my office building as December wind whipped across my face, sharp enough toasting my nose. Everything around me moved as if nothing had changed. The subway still crowded, the coffee shop still with a line out the door, but only I knew that every rhythm in my life had already shifted off track. Since I had reported the unauthorized access, events had snowballed faster than I expected. HR called to verify information. It launched an investigation, and an internal memo about personal privacy went out. People in the office said nothing, but I caught the subtle change in a few colleagues' eyes as if they'd heard whispers about me. Midday, my desk phone rang. The receptionist from the lobby. "Miss Arya, there's a woman here claiming to be a family friend. Her name is Evelyn. She says she has a personal matter to discuss with you." I stood, walked out of the office, and took the elevator down. When the doors opened, I saw Evelyn, Pastor William's wife, standing tall, holding a white envelope. She smiled politely, but her anxious eyes betrayed urgency. "Dear, I'm sorry to show up like this," she said, voice gentle, like calming a restless child. "I came because your mother is very worried. She asked me to deliver this letter, hoping you'll reconsider." It took the envelope, holding it tightly but not opening it. I studied her for a long moment before asking, "Do you know my mother called my company, pretended to be my financial representative, and asked about my income?" Evelyn froze, her face flickering with shock. "I know, I only wanted to help." I nodded slightly. "Yes. Then please pass along this message to my mother. Doing that is not helping, and I don't need another messenger. I just need respect." Evelyn fell silent. I stepped back, then turned away, leaving her awkward stare behind in the lobby's bright lights. Back in my office, the white envelope still in my hand, I finally opened it. Inside was a card with my mother's handwriting. "Dearest Arya, Ethan is going through a hard time and everyone needs you. You're the strongest one in the family. If not you, then who? It breaks my heart to see you turn your back on your brother. Please reconsider." At the bottom in blue ink, an added note: "The whole family is waiting for you. Don't let go of what's most sacred." I folded the card and placed it in my drawer. Over the next 3 days, more people showed up. Julie, our old suburban neighbor, appeared unannounced at my office with a bag of homemade cookies and a soft voice like a breeze. I just wanted to stop by. "Your mom said, you're going through a bit of an inner crisis." And I was worried. She used that exact phrase, inner crisis. I smiled faintly, thanked her politely, and escorted her out. But the chill at the back of my neck wouldn't fade. My mother hadn't just called my company. She had told neighbors, relatives, maybe even the church that I was having a mental crisis. Isolation, a classic tactic but effective. Make those around me see me as unstable so guilt creeps in. If I resist, it must be because I'm not well. No one used words like pressure or trap. They just said I was too sensitive. By Wednesday afternoon, as I left my office building, I spotted a small figure on a bench nearby. Mason, my 9-year-old nephew, holding a paper bag and a cardboard sign scribbled with, "I miss Aunt Arya." I froze. Ethan sat a few steps away, pretending not to notice, but his eyes stayed locked on me, waiting. Mason ran over and handed me the bag. Inside was a small bracelet made of string and plastic beads. "I made this in art class. Do you still have the one from last year?" His innocent eyes shone up at me. I bent down, hugging him, my hands shaking. Ethan approached soft-spoken as though strolling through a park. "See, he misses you. He just wants his aunt back. We'll have to move if my company shuts down. All I'm asking is for you to co-sign. The bank just needs someone like you." I released Mason, eyes fixed on Ethan. "You brought your son here during my work hours, made him sit in the cold just to manipulate me." He forced a smile. "I just thought kids are the best reason to think twice." I stood tall, meeting him with a gaze I had never given before. Number children aren't excuses for adult irresponsibility. He doesn't owe me anything, and I don't owe him a fruster. I turned to leave. Mason's small voice calling after me like a needle pressing into my chest. I didn't look back. That night, I received a message from HR. Another person claiming to be a relative has called asking to verify your mental health status. "We've blocked further contact. If you need legal support, we can refer you." I sat still for a long while. Part of me wanted to cry, but the other part was stone hard. There was no space for weakness now. They didn't just want my signature. They wanted me to believe that refusing meant I was a bad daughter, a cold sister, an unstable employee. I opened my phone and replayed the recording I'd saved. Ethan's voice from Saturday's call. "You just need to sign. After that, I'll handle everything. If you don't, Mom and Dad will lose the house. And Mason, well, that'll be on you." I saved the file on my computer under a new name. Pressure Witness. No one knew I had already begun documenting, storing, preparing as though for a lawsuit. But they would soon, and next time I'd be the one setting the terms, not the guest at a dinner table with my name already typed on the forms. That night, I sat in my small apartment, the yellow light casting uneven shadows on the walls. Mindbox pinged. For a moment, I thought it was another message from my family, but when I opened it, my heart skipped. An internal job posting. Senior analyst for the company's new San Francisco branch. Salary 1.5 times higher with bonuses and stock options. I read it over and over, each line opening a way out of the suffocating maze. My hand trembled as I hovered the mouse over the apply button. I took a deep breath, wondering if I was being reckless. But then Mason's shivering figure in the cold flashed before me, used as a tool to sway me. I saw Ethan's tight-lipped smile, my mother's feigned watery eyes, my father's silence, while his fingers drummed harshly on the wooden table. Every piece had been staged, and me, if I didn't change, I would forever be the pillar holding up failures that were never mine. I hit submit. My hand dropped to the keyboard, my chest exhaling as if a weight had finally been lifted. From that moment, I quietly began building my escape plan. First, I moved part of my savings into a newly opened West Coast bank account under a separate transaction name. I left Not Race linking it to my current workplace or Boston apartment. If everything exploded, I wanted no route leading back to my money. The next afternoon, I took personal leave. I drove to a small storage facility on the outskirts of Somerville and signed a 3-month contract. In a room no bigger than 100 square FT, the air smelled of cement and old paint. I placed the first cardboard boxes, bank papers, work records, old loan contracts, already paid off, all neatly labeled. I secured a new padlock and turned it 3 times myself to be certain. That evening, I met Lily at a cafe near our old college campus. We sat in a corner, the air filled with roasted coffee and the chatter of students. I slid a thick folder across the table. "Keep this for me. It has my birth certificate, diplomas, a few contracts, and an old journal. If anything happens, I need to know these aren't within my family's reach." Lily studied me, her expression tightening. "You're really planning to leave?" I nodded. "San Francisco, a new job. I'm not certain yet, but I have to start moving. If I stay, I'll be crushed." She gripped my hand, her voice steady. "Arya, don't feel guilty. You're not abandoning anyone. They chose their path. You're just choosing yours." Her words anchored me. I smiled faintly, thanked her, and shifted the conversation to old memories. But inside, my choice had never been clearer. The following week, I lived with 2 faces. By day, I still showed up at the office, gave presentations, and chatted casually with colleagues. But inside, I was cutting the ropes one by one. I canceled the family phone plan and registered a new number known only to me. I booked a flight under the guise of a business trip, testing airport security systems. I moved non-essential belongings into storage, excusing it as spring cleaning if asked. Each step was a scissor cut through old strings, sharp enough to sting, but necessary. My family, of course, did not relent. Calls poured in. My mother's tearful voice filled voicemail. Arya not answering frightens me. Ethan needs you. If you don't sign, his company will be. You don't want to bear the guilt of being unfil. My father's texts were blunt, cold. You owe this family more than you realize. Don't forget who raised you. I read them, then deleted them. At times my hands shook from the chokehold of guilt. But then I remembered the green notebook. The trembling words of a 12-year-old girl who had once received only a plain dinner instead of a birthday party. I couldn't abandon that child again. Friday evening, a new email chimed. From San Francisco HR, we would like to invite you to a virtual interview on Monday morning. Estimated duration 1 hour. I exhaled, eyes blurring for a moment. This was more than a career opportunity. It was a lifeline. I rearranged my schedule, immediately, sent an excuse to miss the morning meeting, set up my camera in the living room, tested the lighting, and organized files showcasing my achievements. Every detail was another step deeper into leaving. But outside, the pressure was suffocating. Saturday morning, as I left to buy groceries, I ran into the neighbor my mother often spoke with. She gave me a look, half pity, half reproach. Arya, your mom said, you're unstable. You should rest. Don't fight your family. They only want what's best for you. I forced a smile and walked faster. I had no energy left for explanations. That evening, the doorbell rang through the peephole. Ethan stood there with Mason clutching an old teddy bear. I hesitated, then cracked the door open. Ethan's smile was half-hearted. Sis, he kept begging to see you. Hesked where he'll sleep if we lose the house. You don't want your nephew wandering homeless, do you? Mason's wide eyes looked up at me. His small voice whispered, Auntie, I'm scared of losing my room. My heart clenched. I bent down, hugging him, but my gaze stayed locked on Ethan. Stop this. Don't use your son as a shield to bargain. Ethan stiffened, defiance flashing in his eyes, but then he tugged Mason away. The door closed, leaving me with sorrow and smoldering anger. I sat back at my desk and wrote in my notebook. Plan to leave no turning back. Sunday afternoon, an unfamiliar number called. The voice introduced himself as Pastor Williams's assistant. Warm but firm. Your family expects you at St. Matthew's Church tomorrow afternoon. This is not just a meeting. It's an intervention. You should not refuse. I paused, then replied calmly. I'll be there, but remember, I'll be bringing what I need to say. I ended the call and opened the black case waiting on my desk. Inside were the documents I'd assembled all week, a recording of Ethan admitting he used the loan to cover gambling debts, bank statements proving my parents had hidden assets, and personal notes I'd kept since childhood. Every page was a shard of truth they never wanted exposed. The next day, Bostonskis were heavy and gray. I drove to St. Matthew, sweat dampening my palms. Inside the side hall had been arranged meticulously, chairs in a half circle, a long table in the center. My father sat at the head navy suit, stern eyes. My mother beside him, clutching tissues, her face sculpted into sorrow. Ethan sat 2 seats down, feigning calm while his legs jittered under the table. Alongside them, family lawyer Mitchell, Pastor Williams, and nearly a dozen relatives. The pastor stood, his booming voice filling the hall. We are here today not to argue, but to help Arya understand that family must stay united. This is an opportunity for healing, not division. I sat in the chair prepared for me, placed my case on the table. If you call this healing, then let's treat it as a place to hear the truth. My father frowned, tapping the table. Arya, don't turn this into hostility. We only want you to sign, to preserve family honor. You have a duty, I cut in. Honor built on deceit is nothing but a shadow, and my duty is not to pay for someone else's recklessness. The room quivered with tension. I pulled out my recorder, pressing play. Ethan's voice echoed harsh and hurried. You just need to sign. After that, I'll handle it. If you don't, Mom and Dad lose the house. And Mason, well, that's on you. This debt isn't just the bank. It's also the poker table. I need it wiped clean. The words rang crisp in the stillness. Ethan's face drained of color. He shot up. I was just angry. I didn't mean. I calmly laid down the statements. Here are the bank records. My parents have more than $200,000 in savings. My mother still holds 3 rental properties in her name. Why should I bear the responsibility? A murmur spread among relatives. Aunt Mary, my father's sister, frowned. Robert, is this true? You two have money, and yet you pushed Arya to take the fall. My father looked away, silent. My mother rushed in, her voice quivering. We only thought Arya had more credibility with the bank. We didn't want to expose our assets. I gave a thin smile. The assets are yours. The debt is Ethan's. And somehow I've become the solution. All these years I paid my tuition, covered my own loans. I never had family money, never a co-signer. Why should I sign now for gambling debts and mistakes that aren't mine? Lawyer Mitchell cleared his throat, trying to soften the blow. Arya, legally co-signing is just a gesture of goodwill. It doesn't necessarily mean you'll lose everything. This is how to save Ethan's business. I turned my gaze on him. You know exactly what co-signing means. If Ethan defaults, the bank comes after me first. Say it here before the pastor and everyone else. The lawyer fell silent, staring at his file. Pastor Williams shifted uncomfortably, hands clasped. Arya, don't let anger block forgiveness. Scripture teaches, I interrupted again, this time firm. Forgiveness is not submission. Love does not equal exploitation. If you believe God endorses deception, then I do not share that belief. The silence in the hall froze solid. Ethan slammed his hand on the table, shouting, You're tearing this family apart. I stood, my voice steady, each word dropping heavy onto the wooden floor. This family tore itself apart the moment they decided to use me as a shield for all of Ethan's mistakes. I am not responsible for saving a ship that others deliberately sank. I pulled a thick envelope from my briefcase and placed it in the center of the table. Inside is a copy of all the evidence, recordings, bank statements, and Ethan's messages to me. I've already sent another copy to my personal attorney. If anyone in this family continues to call my workplace or Triesto force me into signing anything, I will hand the entire file over to the court. The room fell into silence. I looked around, watching shock spread across familiar faces. A few relatives leaned toward each other, whispering. The pastor leaned back in his chair, eyes shut as if at a loss for words. I took a deep breath and laid out my terms. I will cut off all contact for 1 year. No meetings, no phone calls, no messages. After 1 year, if behavior has changed, we can talk again. If during that time anyone interferes with my work or personal life, the year starts over. This is your final chance. Ethan shot to his feet, his face burning red. You don't have the right to set conditions. This is your family. I met his eyes unwavering. I do have the right. It comes from the fact that I've supported myself all these years. And you. The only thing you've ever had is blind protection from our parents. Family is not an excuse to take me hostage for your debts. My heels struck firmly against the wood as I walked out of the hall. Behind me, there were no more arguments. Only a dense silence, heavier than any words. That night, I returned to my apartment with both relief and tension pulling at me. The echoes of the church hall still haunted me like a storm had passed, yet the winds still swirled in my chest. I knew they wouldn't stop, not right away. In my mind replayed my father's cold remarks, my mother's theatrical tears, Ethan's angry shouts. They circled me as though still trying to bind me once more. I glanced at the clock. 10:30 p.m. In my inbox, an e-ticket to San Francisco glowed. Departure 12:15 a.m. I had less than 2 hours to leave this place, closed the door behind me, and turned the page. I pulled out the 2 suitcases I had packed weeks ago. One held clothes, my laptop, and a few small keepsakes. The other carried personal documents, a hard drive with all my evidence and essentials I would need to live independently. I locked the apartment door, took one last look at the familiar room, a mix of regret and release washing over me. The taxi drove me through Boston's empty streets. The city looked cold and weary, golden light spilling across aging buildings. It reminded me of the years I had spent here, the pieces of my youth. But in my heart, I knew it no longer belonged to me. When the plane lifted off the ground, I pressed against the window, watching the city's lights shrink. I inhaled deeply, my chest filling with a sense of freedom. The roar of the engines drowned out everything else, Asif severing the invisible rope that had held me captive for years. The next morning, as the plane landed in California, I turned on my phone. Dozens of messages and missed calls flooded in. 4 from Ethan, 2 tour texts from my father. 10 a.m. at the bank. Don't disgrace us. A longer voicemail from my mother, her voice breaking. Arya, please do the right thing. Don't abandon your brother. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my laptop in the small hotel I had reserved. On the screen, the evidence folder I had spent weeks compiling sat waiting. I typed a long email attaching all the recordings, statements, screenshots, and my detailed explanation. I sent it to extended relatives, those who believed I was the ungrateful daughter, and to members of the church community who had only ever heard my parents' version. In the letter, I wrote, "I stayed silent for years, thinking silence kept the peace. But silence only made others believe I agreed to be the sacrifice. This is the full truth. I don't ask anyone to take my side only to see clearly who has been exploiting whom." When I hit send, my hands no longer shook. Within hours, responses began arriving. A cousin in Chicago wrote, "Arya, I'm sorry I misjudged you. I believed what your parents told me, that you were wealthy but refused to help. Now I see what they hid." An aunt from my mother's side wrote simply, "I always felt the unfairness. Stay strong." I leaned back, tears rolling down, not from sorrow, but from the rare feeling of being heard. Meanwhile, I imagined my parents and Ethan at the bank that morning, waiting, the folder on the table, eyes darting to the clock, my chair empty. And as they reached for their phones, dozens of emails landed in their inboxes, each one carrying the evidence I had exposed. I could picture my mother's pale confusion, my father's smoldering rage, Ethan's shock as he heard his own gambling confession playing in his ear. My phone buzzed again. A call from lawyer Mitchell. I ignored it. Minutes later, an email arrived. "Arya, the family is shaken. They want to reopen discussions. I advise caution. Public exposure of these matters could damage the family's reputation." I smiled bitterly. Family reputation. Words that had weighed on me for years, but now I no longer wished to carry them. That afternoon, I walked along the San Francisco shoreline. The waves crashed steadily, the salty wind brushing against my skin. I felt as though my body was being cleansed of years of dust from enduring too long. I wondered if I could ever forgive myself for choosing me, and then I realized the only forgiveness I needed was my own. That evening, more messages arrived. An aunt wrote, "You did the right thing. Don't feel guilty. You deserve a life for yourself." A former church friend said, "Arya, they're spreading rumors that you left because of a breakdown, but we read your email. Don't worry, many of us are standing with you." I closed my laptop and gazed out the hotel window. The California sky stretched wide, glowing in the sunset, like a promise that I could begin again. Fear lingered in me, but above all was freedom. For the first time in years, I breathed deeply without needing to explain myself to anyone. And in that calm, I knew the battle wasn't over. But this time, I held the power. In my first days in San Francisco, I rented a small apartment near the Embarcadero. Barely 400 square feet yet, the light streaming through the sea-icing windows wrapped me like a gentle embrace. Each morning I pulled the curtains wide, letting sunlight and the sound of waves mingle with fresh coffee. No more relentless phone calls. No more scrutinizing eyes of relatives. Just me and a new day unfolding. Work at the San Francisco branch began sooner than expected. On my very first day, I was introduced as lead analyst for a major healthcare investment project. My colleagues didn't see me as the walking wallet or the responsible sister, but simply as a respected professional. My direct manager, Marisol, a Mexican-Amian woman, shook my hand firmly. "Arya, I read your record. Impressive. We need people like you here." Her words lifted the weight Boston had piled on my shoulders. In the evenings, I joined a group therapy class. The therapist encouraged me to try it, to loosen knots that had tightened for years. At first, I sat quietly listening to others share about family loss and betrayal. Then I realized my story could comfort too. I spoke about unequal birthdays, about exams I passed in silence, about the folder shoved in front of me without a single question. The room listened. No judgment, only empathy. When I stepped out afterward, ocean wind brushing my face, I felt lighter. One weekend, I happened to read an announcement about recruiting volunteers for a financial education program for young women in the community. I signed up right away. Once a week, I stood in front of 15 girls, ages 17 to 22, explaining how to open a bank account, how to avoid credit card debt, how to budget. Those bright eyes fixed on me, scribbling notes eagerly, reminded me of myself at 18, struggling alone with stacks of student loan papers. I was no longer alone. I was turning bitter lessons into tools for others. Neighbors in my apartment building became another source of support. Ellie, a woman in her 40s, often knocked on my door with dishes she'd cooked. Mr. David, a retired man downstairs, taught me how to care for plants on my balcony. We shared tea in the evenings, talking about books and travels. No one asked how much money I had. No one mentioned family duty. They only cared whether I was happy. One evening after returning from the volunteer class, my phone buzzed with a new message. I thought it might be Akalig or Lily from Boston, but when I opened it, I froze. The sender was Mason, my nephew. The short line on the screen read, "Aunt Arya, I found you online. I think you're amazing. I want to meet you someday." I sank into my chair, vision blurring. The memory of Mason sitting outside my office, clutching his old teddy bear, rushed back. That innocent boy bore no fault. He was just a child pulled into a script written by adults. I typed erase, typed again, unsure of what to say. Finally, I wrote, "I miss you so much when you're older and can decide for yourself. I'll welcome you. Stay healthy and study hard." Almost instantly, a reply appeared. "I promise. You're my biggest role model." I pressed the phone to my chest, tears spilling. In that moment, I realized that even though I'd left Boston, a thread still connected me. But it wasn't a chain. It was hope. In the days that followed, my life settled into new rhythm. Mornings at the company where my voice was heard in major meetings. Afternoons with tea and stories from Mr. David about his youth. Evenings in therapy or preparing lessons for the volunteer group. My life was no longer defined by fighting family pressure. It was about building a new home from friendship, respect, and connections I chose. Once Ellie looked at me and said, "Arya, you carry sadness in your eyes, but I also see a very bright flame. Keep it. You have us here." I smiled softly, warmed inside. Yes, I had found another kind of family, not tied by blood, but built on sincerity and respect. And in Mason's words across the phone screen, I saw a future not of meaningless sacrifice, but a path I had the right to walk with my own feet. 3 months passed since I arrived in California. Life here seeped into me like breath. The sound of waves each morning, sunlight stretching across the Golden Gate, lively meetings with colleagues and volunteer lessons that gave my days purpose. I had grown used to living without urgent calls, without watchful eyes, without dinners rigged as traps. One afternoon, while sorting materials for a community class, I received an envelope from Boston. The handwriting on the front made my heart sink. My father's. Inside was a letter, shaky handwriting, ink smudged in places. "Arya, your mother is very sick. The doctor says she doesn't have much time left. This is the moment you must come home. The family cannot do without you. Please forgive all past misunderstandings. Come back before it's too late." I sat still, gripping the letter. Part of me wanted to believe, because no one wants to doubt their mother's health. But layers of suspicion, built from past deceptions, stopped me from reacting quickly. I called Lily asking her to check Boston hospitals. Within half an hour, she called back. "There's no matching name on the admissions list. Arya, it's another fabrication." I closed my eyes, leaning back. Pain and sorrow welled inside, like an old scar being scratched open. They still hadn't stopped even willing to use illness as leverage. That night, I decided to wait no longer. I sent out an online meeting invite to my entire family, parents, Ethan, and relatives who had sided with them. I titled it clearly, "Truth and Boundaries." When the screen lit up, familiar faces appeared. My father, rigid-backed, stern. My mother, clutching tissues, eyes red. Ethan, slouched with a bored look. A few uncles and aunts curious. I was the host and I would not be led. "I'm opening this meeting not to argue, but so you all hear the truth. After that, I'll set my conditions." My father frowned. "Arya, what game are you playing? The family is already exhausted with you." I didn't reply. I opened the slideshow. First, Ethan's recorded admission of using loan money for gambling. His voice clear. "I need to clear the poker debt. You just need to sign." Then bank statements, showing my parents had enough assets but hid them. Next, emails and threatening texts they sent me, all projected for everyone to see. The virtual room went silent. Some relatives covered their mouths. My mother lowered her head. My father looked away. Ethan jumped up. Voice sharp. "This is spliced. You're making me look bad." I remained calm, playing the video of him bringing Mason to my office, prompting the boy to say he feared losing his room. Silence again. Ethan bit his lip, then switched off his camera. His square disappeared, leaving an empty space. I inhaled deeply, pulling out an old letter, the handwriting shaky but loving my grandmother's. I read slowly. "Arya, your life belongs to you first. You may love your family, but don't let that love become chains. Remember, you weren't born to carry it all. You were born to live your own life." When I finished, the room stayed silent. Tears streamed, but my voice stayed firm. "Grandma saw what you never admitted. I'm not a shield. I am a person with a choice." My mother lifted her gaze, eyes wet. Her voice trembled. "Arya, I'm sorry. I never imagined it would go this far. I was wrong to leave you alone so long." Her words cracked with regret. My father stayed silent, his fist clenched on the table. Yet I saw a fracture in his eyes. I looked into the camera steady. "I'm willing to see you again, but only if you respect my boundaries. I will cut contact for another year. After that, if anyone wants to see me, show me change through actions. If anyone interferes in my work or private life, I'll hand everything to the law. This is the final condition." No one objected. My father's tapping stopped. My mother nodded, tears streaming. The rest stayed mute. I ended screen sharing, looking once more at their faces. "I've said enough. The rest is up to you." I clicked end meeting. The hotel room was quiet except for the sound of waves. I stepped onto the balcony, hugging my knees in the wooden chair. Before me, the California sunset burned orange across the sky. Sea wind swept through my hair, my arms wrapped around myself. My smile wasn't forced. It came from deep within, from the certainty of owning my life. In that sunset, I knew my choice to live free with boundaries of my making and the belief that I deserved respect. If you've ever sat alone at sunset wondering if you had the right to live a life unbound by obligation and fear, then perhaps you understand how I felt. Not everyone is born into a family that loves rightly, but each of us deserves a place to belong, whether by blood or with those we choose. I don't share this story to condemn, but to remind myself and maybe someone listening that sometimes love requires limits. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but allowing yourself to move forward stronger, clearer, and full of hope. What do you think of my choice? If it were you, would you return or keep your distance? Do boundaries truly heal or only create distance? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments because each share might be the key someone else needs. If this story touched something in you, please follow the channel. There are more pieces of life to uncover. More journeys of sons, mothers, fathers, families broken and mended waiting for you.